Sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness can create ripples that transform lives in ways we never expect. That's exactly what happened to Harper Evans, a Navy SEAL veteran carrying the weight of her past as she quietly navigated life in Phoenix. What began as an ordinary day at the gym turned into a confrontation that shook the room and sparked a series of events that would change everything. Harper, a woman of discipline and resilience, had always kept the world at arm's length. But after a chance encounter with an elderly teacher named Henry, a shy receptionist named Tara, and a group of struggling veterans, Harper found herself drawn into a community she never thought she needed. As she faced challenges, both old and new, Harper began to uncover the power of connection and the quiet strength that comes from lifting others up. But what happens when the weight of the past collides with the promise of a brighter future? The gym was Harper Evans's sanctuary. Its walls, painted a utilitarian gray, seemed to hum with the rhythm of determination, weights clanging, sneakers squeaking on rubberized floors, and music thumping faintly from overhead speakers. Harper, a 34-year-old African-American Navy SEAL veteran, had claimed her corner of the room as part of her routine. Every evening, she worked through her carefully crafted circuit. Deadlifts, burpees, pull-ups. It was a ritual that kept her grounded, a practice that demanded focus and left little room for distractions. Harper's life was defined by structure. She lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment just outside downtown Phoenix. The walls were bare except for a single framed photograph of her SEAL team, taken during a rare moment of levity overseas. Her furniture was simple, a well-worn couch, a thrifted coffee table, and a tidy kitchen where she prepared her meals with military precision. Despite its simplicity, her space reflected a quiet resilience, though the silence often felt heavy. On this particular evening, Harper adjusted the weights on the squat rack, her black leggings and tank top blending into the background. Her earbuds were in, signaling her unspoken rule: no small talk. As she tested the barbell, a shadow loomed beside her. She glanced up to see Brad Caldwell, a gym regular in his 40s with broad shoulders and an air of entitlement. "You are using that wrong," Brad said, his tone thick with condescension. Harper raised an eyebrow and pulled out one earbud. "Excuse me?" "The weights," he continued, gesturing broadly as though demonstrating for a beginner. "You are going to hurt yourself. Let me show you the proper form." "Thanks, but I have got it," Harper replied, her voice calm but firm. She turned back to the barbell, but Brad did not leave. Instead, he crossed his arms, his smirk fading into a scowl. "I have been coming here for years," he said. "Maybe you should listen to someone with experience." Harper ignored him, focusing on her breathing as she began her reps. But Brad stayed close, muttering criticisms under his breath. His presence was a weight of its own, oppressive and unwelcome. As Harper moved to the bench press, Brad followed. This time his voice was loud enough to draw attention. "Women like you think you know everything, huh?" She froze mid-movement, her jaw tightening. Slowly she turned to face him. "What exactly is that supposed to mean?" Brad shrugged, clearly emboldened by the small audience now watching. "Maybe you should stick to what you are good at." The room seemed to grow quieter. A few gym-goers paused their workouts, glancing between Harper and Brad. Harper met his gaze, her expression calm, but her eyes blazing. Without a word, she returned to her workout. Brad, however, was not done. His irritation boiled over, and his voice dropped into a low, threatening tone. "You better watch your mouth," he snapped, stepping closer. Harper stood her ground, her body still but her mind alert. Years of training had taught her how to assess and neutralize threats. She caught the eye of a young man on a treadmill who looked as though he might intervene and gave him the slightest shake of her head. When Brad grabbed her arm, the room gasped. Harper moved instinctively, her free hand shooting up to grip his wrist. With a quick twist, she forced him to release her and stepped back, placing herself out of his reach. "Do not put your hands on me," she said, her voice steady and sharp. Humiliated, Brad lunged at her, but Harper sidestepped his clumsy attack. Using his momentum against him, she swept his legs out from under him, sending him crashing to the mat. The gym erupted into chaos. Some people shouted, others scrambled to get out of the way, and a few pulled out their phones to record the scene. Harper stood over Brad, her breathing steady as she stared him down. "Leave," she said firmly. A gym employee, Tara Fields, finally stepped forward. She was a petite young woman with wide eyes and trembling hands. "Sir, you need to go," Tara said, her voice shaky. Brad glared at Harper one last time before storming out. As the door slammed shut, the room exhaled collectively. A small ripple of applause broke out, but Harper raised a hand to silence it. "It is over," she said simply, before gathering her things and heading to the locker room. Inside the locker room, Harper stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her face was calm, composed, but the adrenaline coursing through her veins told a different story. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly, grounding herself. This was not the first time she had faced someone like Brad, and it would not be the last. As she zipped up her gym bag, the door creaked open. Tara stepped inside, hesitating near the doorway. "Miss Evans?" she began, her voice soft. "Harper," she corrected. "Harper," Tara said, her cheeks flushing. "I just wanted to say thank you. That was incredible. You stood up to him like it was nothing." Harper gave a small, polite smile. "It was not nothing, but I am glad it is over." Tara nodded, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. "I wish I could be that brave. I always freeze up in situations like that." "Bravery is not about not being scared," Harper said. "It is about standing firm when it matters." Tara's eyes widened, her admiration evident. "Well, thank you again. You inspired me." As Tara left, Harper felt a flicker of something she had not felt in a long time. Connection. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a reminder that even small moments could leave a lasting impact. Outside, the evening air was cool against her skin. As Harper walked to her car, she glanced up at the sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear, and felt the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. She did not know it yet, but that evening at the gym would mark the beginning of a ripple, a series of unexpected acts of kindness that would change her life and the lives of those around her. Harper Evans drove home from the gym in silence, her hands steady on the wheel. The cool desert night stretched around her, the faint glow of city lights in the distance. She turned onto a quiet street lined with modest apartments, her home a simple structure with weathered brick and a small patch of dry grass out front. Inside, the apartment greeted her with its familiar stillness. A single floor lamp cast a warm glow over the living room, where her couch and coffee table stood neatly in place. On the wall hung the photograph of her SEAL team, a snapshot of camaraderie frozen in time. Harper's gaze lingered on the faces in the picture, her chest tightening as it always did. She set her gym bag by the door and walked into the kitchen. Pouring herself a glass of water, she leaned against the counter, letting the events of the evening replay in her mind. Brad's condescension, the crackling tension in the gym, and the way her instincts had taken over when he grabbed her arm, it all felt like a scene from her past. For years, Harper had trained to stay calm under pressure. In the Navy SEALs, composure was the difference between life and death. But that composure had been hard-earned, forged in the crucible of combat and loss. Her thoughts drifted to a day she rarely allowed herself to remember. It was early in her deployment, during a mission gone wrong. Her team had been ambushed, and in the chaos, her closest friend and teammate, Sergeant Kyle Harris, had been critically wounded. Harper had done everything she could to save him, but by the time they reached safety, it was too late. In the days that followed, Harper had spiraled into guilt and anger, questioning her decisions and her place on the team. But then, one evening, her commanding officer, Lieutenant Grace Nolan, had approached her with quiet kindness. "You did everything you could," Grace had said, her voice steady but gentle. "Kyle wouldn't want you carrying this weight alone. Lean on your team, we're here for you." It was a simple gesture, but it had been enough to pull Harper back from the edge. Grace's words reminded her that strength wasn't just about what you could endure alone. It was about allowing others to support you when you needed it most. Now, as Harper stood in her kitchen, the memory felt unexpectedly vivid. She thought of Tara, the young receptionist at the gym. Tara's hesitant words of gratitude echoed in her mind, stirring something Harper hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of purpose beyond her own survival. The next morning, Harper woke early, as she always did. The sunlight filtered through her blinds, painting the walls with soft golden hues. After a quick breakfast of scrambled eggs and toast, she laced up her running shoes and headed out for a jog. The streets were quiet, the air crisp with a faint hint of desert sage. Running was Harper's meditation, a way to clear her mind and center herself. But today, her thoughts kept circling back to Tara. At first, Harper dismissed the feeling. She wasn't the kind of person to dwell on fleeting interactions. Yet something about Tara's earnestness, her vulnerability, had struck a chord. Harper remembered what it felt like to be young and unsure, navigating a world that often seemed determined to test you. As she turned onto a familiar path through a nearby park, she noticed an elderly man sitting on a bench. His shoulders were hunched, and his hands trembled slightly as he struggled to open a bottle of water. Without thinking, Harper slowed to a stop. "Need some help?" she asked, her voice calm and steady. The man looked up, his weathered face breaking into a grateful smile. "I could use an extra pair of hands, if you don't mind." Harper took the bottle, twisting the cap loose before handing it back. "There you go. Thank you, young lady," he said, taking a sip. "Not as easy as it used to be, these hands of mine." Harper nodded, noticing the slight tremor in his fingers. "Do you come here often?" "Most mornings," he replied. "Gets me out of the house. Name's Henry, by the way." "Henry Lawson." "Harper Evans," she said, shaking his hand gently. For the next few minutes, they talked. Henry shared stories of his days as a school teacher and his love for reading, though he admitted his eyesight wasn't what it used to be. Harper listened, surprised by how natural the conversation felt. As they spoke, she noticed a small frayed notebook sticking out of his pocket. "What's that?" she asked, nodding toward it. Henry chuckled. "My list of favorite books. Keeps me company when I can't sleep. Maybe one day, I'll have the chance to pass it on to someone who'll enjoy it as much as I did." Harper smiled, moved by his quiet resilience. Before they parted ways, she promised to look out for him the next time she jogged through the park. Back at home, Harper couldn't shake the feeling that meeting Henry had been more than coincidence. His gratitude had reminded her of how powerful even the smallest acts of kindness could be. Later that evening, as she walked into the gym, Harper noticed Tara behind the front desk. The young woman looked up, her face lighting up with a shy smile. "Hi, Harper," Tara said. "I'm glad to see you." "Hey, Tara," Harper replied. "How are you doing?" Tara hesitated, as if weighing her words. "Better," she said finally. "I've been thinking about what you said last night, about standing firm." Harper nodded, sensing there was more. "And?" "I guess I realized I've been letting fear hold me back," Tara admitted. "Not just at work, but in my life. I want to change that." Harper studied her for a moment, then said, "You're already changing it, just by recognizing it. That's the first step." Tara's smile grew, a flicker of confidence in her eyes. "Thanks, Harper. That means a lot." As Harper began her workout, she couldn't help but feel a quiet sense of fulfillment. For years, she had focused solely on her own journey, shielding herself from the vulnerabilities of others. But now, she was starting to see the value in letting her guard down, even just a little. In the days that followed, Harper made a point of checking in with Tara during her visits to the gym. Each conversation seemed to draw them closer, forging a bond that neither of them had anticipated. And each morning, Harper returned to the park, where Henry was always waiting on his bench with a smile and a story to share. For the first time in years, Harper felt the stirrings of something she thought she had lost, a connection to the world around her, built not on obligation, but on choice. Little did she know, these small moments of kindness were only the beginning of a journey that would change her life forever. The morning air was crisp as Harper jogged through the park, her steady rhythm blending with the faint rustle of leaves. As she rounded the bend, the familiar figure of Henry Lawson came into view. He was perched on his usual bench, his worn cardigan buttoned unevenly, and a faded notebook resting on his lap. "Morning, Henry," Harper called as she approached, slowing to a stop. Henry looked up, his face breaking into a warm smile. "Well, good morning, Harper. You're as punctual as the sunrise." Harper chuckled, sitting down next to him. "What's in the notebook today?" "Ah, just a few musings," he said, patting the cover. "Mostly about the books I love to teach. It's funny, though. Sometimes I think about all the students who pass through my classroom, and I wonder if any of them remember me." "Of course they do," Harper replied. "The good ones always leave a mark." Henry smiled wistfully. "I hope so." The conversation meandered, touching on everything from classic novels to the state of the neighborhood. Harper found herself enjoying these moments of quiet connection, which felt like a welcome counterbalance to her structured, solitary life. That evening, as Harper stepped into the gym, she noticed the atmosphere seemed livelier than usual. Tara Field stood behind the front desk, chatting animatedly with Marcus Thompson, a fitness coach Harper had seen around but never spoken to. "Harper," Tara called, waving her over. Harper approached, nodding a polite greeting to Marcus. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a friendly smile and an easy demeanor that contrasted with her own reserved nature. "Tara was just telling me about the incident with Brad the other night," Marcus said. "I heard you handled it like a pro." "It wasn't much," Harper replied, her tone neutral. "Not much?" Tara interjected. "You were amazing." Marcus grinned. "Sounds like we could use someone like you in one of our self-defense workshops." Harper blinked, caught off guard. "Workshops?" "Yeah," Marcus said. "I run a few every month. It's mostly for beginners, basic techniques, situational awareness. You'd be great at it." Tara nodded enthusiastically. "You'd inspire so many people, Harper." Harper hesitated. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight, let alone teaching others, but something about the idea intrigued her. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "Fair enough," Marcus replied. "The offer's open whenever you're ready." As Harper moved to the squat rack, she caught herself replaying the conversation. The thought of stepping into a leadership role again stirred a mix of apprehension and curiosity. The next morning, Harper found herself back at the park. Henry was there as usual, but this time he seemed distracted. His notebook lay forgotten beside him, and his gaze was fixed on the ground. "Everything okay?" Harper asked as she sat down. Henry sighed. "Just one of those days, I suppose. Getting older isn't for the faint of heart." Harper waited, sensing there was more. "It's this darn knee of mine," he admitted. "It's been giving me trouble lately. Makes it harder to get around." "Have you seen a doctor?" Henry waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, they'll just tell me what I already know. I'll manage." Harper frowned. "You shouldn't have to manage alone." Henry looked at her, his expression softening. "You remind me of my wife, you know, always looking out for everyone else." "Maybe she was onto something," Harper said with a small smile. For the next hour, Harper listened as Henry reminisced about his late wife, Evelyn. The way he spoke about her, his voice tinged with both love and loss, reminded Harper of the importance of connection, even when it felt like a risk. When they parted, Harper promised to check in on him more often. At the gym that evening, Harper was surprised to see Marcus waiting for her near the front desk. "Tara told me you'd be here," he said, holding up a flyer. We're hosting a community event this weekend, fitness demos, workshops, that sort of thing. You should come. Harper scanned the flyer. The event was meant to bring people together, a mix of gym-goers and local residents. Why me? She asked. Marcus shrugged. You've got a presence, Harper. People notice you even if you don't think they do. Harper considered his words. She had spent so long blending into the background, keeping her world small and contained. But now, she was starting to wonder if that was the right approach. I'll think about it, she said again. Looking forward to it, Marcus replied, his tone confident. The weekend arrived, and Harper found herself at the gym's community event, feeling slightly out of place. The space buzzed with energy, people of all ages milling about, trying different fitness activities. Marcus was at the center of it all, demonstrating exercises with his trademark enthusiasm. Glad you made it, he said when he spotted Harper. She nodded, scanning the crowd. Her eyes landed on Tara, who was helping a group of teenagers at one of the stations. She's really coming out of her shell, Marcus said, following her gaze. Yeah, Harper replied. She's got potential. As the day went on, Harper found herself drawn into conversations with other attendees. One woman, Dana Bell, introduced herself as a retired nurse and shared how fitness had helped her recover from a serious illness. Another man, a young veteran named Noah, spoke about his struggles with PTSD and how the gym had become his refuge. By the time the event ended, Harper felt a sense of connection she hadn't experienced in years. Later that night, as Harper sat in her quiet apartment, she reflected on the day. For so long she had viewed her past as a series of closed doors, her time in the military, her losses, her struggles to reintegrate. But now, she was beginning to see that those experiences didn't have to define her. The connections she was building with Henry, Tara, Marcus, and the others were small ripples, but they were spreading. And for the first time in a long time, Harper felt a glimmer of hope. The next morning, Harper woke with the rare sensation of anticipation. She had planned her usual run through the park, but the thought of seeing Henry made her steps feel lighter. As she laced up her running shoes, the sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting streaks of gold across her apartment floor. Her home felt a little less sterile today, though she couldn't pinpoint why. Maybe it was the lingering energy from the gym event, or the realization that she was beginning to let people into her world again. When Harper arrived at the park, Henry was there on his usual bench, but something was different. His shoulders seemed to sag lower than usual, and his hands rested idly on his lap, his trusty notebook nowhere in sight. "Morning, Henry," Harper greeted, sitting beside him. Henry looked up, his eyes clouded with worry. "Morning, Harper," he replied, his voice quieter than usual. "What's on your mind?" she asked gently. Henry sighed, the lines on his face deepening. "It's nothing, really. Just an old man's problems." Harper tilted her head, waiting. She had learned from experience that silence often drew out what words couldn't. Finally, Henry relented. "My fridge broke down last night," he admitted. "The darn thing just quit on me. I called around, but the cost of a replacement is more than I can handle right now." "Have you talked to anyone who could help?" Harper asked. Henry shook his head. "I don't want to be a burden. I've managed this far, and I'll manage this too." The words hit Harper like a distant echo of her own thoughts. She had spent so many years carrying her burdens alone, refusing help even when it was offered. But hearing them from Henry, someone who had shown her nothing but kindness, made her realize how isolating that mindset could be. "I'll help you figure something out," Harper said firmly. Henry smiled faintly but waved her off. "You've got your own life to worry about, Harper. I'll manage." "Henry," Harper said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Let me help." That evening, Harper found herself standing in the gym's break room, scanning a flyer pinned to the bulletin board. "Community Resources for Seniors" was printed across the top in bold letters, with a list of organizations that offered support for elderly residents. What are you looking at? Tara's voice startled her. Harper turned to see the young receptionist standing in the doorway, her curious expression softened by the same shyness Harper had grown used to seeing. "A friend of mine needs a little help," Harper replied, gesturing to the flyer. Tara stepped closer, studying the list. "Who?" "Henry Lawson. He's a retired teacher I met at the park. His fridge broke and he can't afford to replace it." Tara frowned. "That's awful. What are you going to do?" "Find a way to help," Harper said simply. Tara hesitated, then said, "If there's anything I can do, let me know. He sounds like a good person." Harper nodded, touched by the offer. "Thanks, Tara. I'll keep that in mind." The next day, Harper made a few calls, starting with the organizations listed on the flyer. Some promised to follow up, while others said there were waiting lists. Frustrated but determined, she decided to visit Henry to let him know she hadn't forgotten about him. When she arrived at the park, Henry was sitting on his bench, a faint smile breaking across his face as she approached. "Harper," he said warmly. "Didn't expect to see you today." "I've got some good news," she replied, sitting down beside him. "There are a couple of places that might be able to help with the fridge. It might take a little time, but we'll get it sorted." Henry's eyes softened. "You didn't have to go through all that trouble." "It's not trouble," Harper said. "It's what friends do." For a moment, Henry seemed too moved to speak. Finally, he said, "Evelyn used to say that kindness doesn't cost a thing, but it's worth more than gold. You remind me of her more and more every day." Harper felt a warmth rise in her chest, a mix of gratitude and the bittersweet reminder of what kindness could mean to someone who needed it most. Later that week, Harper's persistence paid off. A local charity that provided household essentials to seniors had agreed to deliver a replacement fridge to Henry's apartment at no cost. Harper called Henry to share the news, and his voice cracked with emotion as he thanked her. "You've done more for me than I could ever repay," he said. "You don't have to repay me," Harper replied. "Just keep being you." On the day the fridge was delivered, Harper accompanied Henry to his apartment, a cozy space filled with shelves of books and framed photographs of his late wife. As the delivery workers set up the new appliance, Henry offered Harper a cup of tea, his hands trembling slightly as he poured. "This place suits you," Harper said, glancing around. Henry chuckled. "It's not much, but it's home." They sipped their tea in companionable silence until the delivery workers finished. As they left, Henry turned to Harper, his expression serious. "You've given me more than just a fridge, Harper," he said. "You've reminded me that there's still good in this world, even when it's hard to see." Harper nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "You've reminded me, too." That evening, Harper returned to her apartment feeling lighter than she had in years. She sat on the couch, staring at the photograph of her SEAL team. For so long, she had carried the guilt of what she had lost, believing that the weight was hers alone to bear. But Henry's gratitude and the simple act of helping him had shown her that healing wasn't just about facing your past, it was about building connections in the present. The next morning, as Harper jogged through the park, she noticed Marcus setting up equipment for an outdoor workout session. He waved her over, grinning. "Harper," he said, "you free this weekend? I've got a self-defense workshop, and I could really use an assistant." Harper hesitated, the old instinct to retreat rising in her chest. But then she thought of Henry, of Tara, of the ripple effects that small acts of kindness could create. "Yeah," she said finally, "I think I can make that work." Marcus beamed. "Perfect. See you then." As Harper continued her run, the sun rose higher, casting long shadows that stretched across the path. For the first time in a long time, Harper felt as though she wasn't running away from anything. She was running towards something, a new chapter, filled with connection, purpose, and the quiet power of kindness. The weekend arrived with a clear, cloudless sky. Harper stood in the gym's main hall, watching Marcus arrange mats for the self-defense workshop. The room buzzed with energy as participants filtered in, some seasoned gym-goers, others tentative newcomers. Among them was Tara, her usually shy demeanor replaced by a nervous excitement. "You ready for this?" Marcus asked, turning to Harper with an encouraging smile. Harper nodded, her expression calm, but her heart thudding. "Let's do it." The workshop began with Marcus introducing basic techniques, his voice steady and commanding as he demonstrated moves designed to help participants escape common holds. Harper stood by his side, assisting when needed and offering corrections with a quiet confidence. "Tara, try the wrist escape again," Harper said, watching as the young receptionist hesitated. Tara's partner grabbed her wrist lightly, and she attempted the move but faltered halfway through. "Stop overthinking," Harper said, stepping closer. "You're stronger than you realize. Use your momentum." Tara took a breath and tried again, this time executing the move cleanly. Her eyes lit up with a mix of surprise and pride. "I did it!" she exclaimed. "Of course you did," Harper replied, a small smile breaking through her usual stoic demeanor. As the workshop continued, Harper found herself easing into the role. She demonstrated techniques, corrected stances, and offered encouragement where it was needed. The room began to feel less like a collection of strangers and more like a community, a group of people coming together to learn and grow. After the workshop, Marcus approached Harper as the participants began to leave. "You are a natural out there," he said. Harper shrugged. "I just followed your lead." Marcus chuckled. "You did more than that. People were looking to you, Harper. They trust you." Harper glanced around, noticing the lingering smiles on the faces of those who had stayed to chat. Even Tara, who had once shied away from crowds, was laughing with a group of participants. "Maybe you're right," Harper admitted, though the thought still felt unfamiliar. That evening, as Harper walked through the park on her way home, she spotted Henry sitting on his bench, a book opens in his lap. "How was the workshop?" he asked as she approached. "It went well," Harper said, sitting beside him. Henry looked at her knowingly. "I can tell. You've got that look." "What look?" "The look of someone who's starting to realize their own worth," Henry said with a smile. Harper chuckled, shaking her head. "You're imagining things." "Maybe," Henry replied. "But I've been around long enough to know when someone's found their place." The words stayed with Harper as she walked home. She thought of the workshop, of Tara's newfound confidence, and of the connections she had begun to build. For years, she had lived as though her past defined her, as though the weight of her losses left no room for anything else. But now, she was starting to see that her experiences didn't have to be a barrier. They could be a bridge. Over the next few weeks, Harper noticed a change in Tara. The once timid receptionist began to speak up more, offering ideas during staff meetings and greeting gym members with a new sense of assurance. One evening, as Harper finished her workout, Tara approached her at the front desk. "Harper, can I ask you something?" Tara said, her cheeks slightly flushed. "Sure," Harper replied. Tara hesitated, then said, "I've been thinking about taking a self-defense instructor course. Do you think I could do it?" Harper studied her, seeing the uncertainty in her eyes, but also the determination beneath it. "Yes," Harper said firmly. "I think you'd be great at it." Tara's face lit up. "Really? Really?" Harper said. "You've already got the most important part down. You care about people. The rest is just practice." Tara beamed, her confidence growing with every word. "Thanks, Harper. That means a lot." One evening, as Harper left the gym, she received a text from Marcus. "Marcus, hey, got a minute to chat?" Curious, Harper called him back. "What's up?" she asked. "I wanted to run something by you," Marcus said. "There's an opening at a local community center for a fitness coach. It's mostly volunteer work, but I think you'd be perfect for it." Harper frowned. "Volunteer work?" "Yeah," Marcus said. They're looking for someone who can connect with people, especially veterans. I know it's not your usual thing, but I think you'd make a real difference there." Harper hesitated. The idea of stepping into a role like that felt daunting, but also intriguing. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "That's all I ask," Marcus replied. The following morning, Harper visited the community center out of curiosity. The building was modest, with brightly painted walls and a welcoming atmosphere. As she walked through the halls, she passed a room where a group of veterans was gathered, their laughter echoing down the corridor. A staff member approached her, introducing herself as Lisa. "Marcus told us you might stop by," Lisa said with a warm smile. "Let me show you around." As they toured the center, Harper began to see the potential. The space was more than just a gym. It was a place where people came to rebuild their lives, to find support and connection. When they returned to the front desk, Lisa handed Harper a brochure. "No pressure, but we'd love to have you on board." Harper nodded, tucking the brochure into her bag. That evening, as Harper sat on her couch, she thought about the community center. It reminded her of the camaraderie she had felt in the SEALs, the sense of being part of something bigger than herself. She glanced at the photograph on the wall, the faces of her teammates staring back at her. For the first time in years, she felt as though she was honoring their memory, not by clinging to the past, but by moving forward. Harper picked up her phone and dialed Marcus. "I'm in," she said. Marcus's laugh on the other end was full of warmth. "I knew you would be." As Harper prepared for her first day at the community center, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of excitement. She was stepping into something new, something that felt like a natural extension of the connections she had begun to build. The ripple of kindness was spreading, and Harper was ready to see where it would lead. Harper stood outside the community center the following morning, her nerves hidden beneath her calm exterior. The modest building, with its vibrant murals and welcoming banners, bustled with activity. Veterans gathered on the front steps, exchanging jokes and stories, while staff moved purposefully, organizing the day's events. As Harper stepped inside, Lisa greeted her with a wide smile. "Harper, right on time," Lisa said. "I can't tell you how glad we are to have you here." Harper nodded, her expression steady. "Happy to help. What's the plan?" Lisa handed her a clipboard with the day's schedule. "You'll be leading a small fitness session today, nothing too intense, just a warm-up and some light exercises. Most of the group hasn't worked out in years, so go easy on them." "Got it," Harper replied. Lisa led her to a spacious room, lined with mats and modest gym equipment. About a dozen veterans were gathered inside, their conversations fading as Harper entered. She could feel their eyes on her, a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "Morning," Harper said, her tone even but firm. "I'm Harper Evans. I'll be running today's session." One man, a wiry figure with salt and pepper hair, raised an eyebrow. "You're military?" "Yeah," Harper replied. "Navy SEAL." A murmur rippled through the group, the initial skepticism giving way to intrigue. "Well, hell," the man said with a grin. "Guess we're in good hands." The group chuckled, and Harper felt the tension in the room ease. The session began with simple stretches and body weight exercises. Harper moved among the group, offering guidance and encouragement. She quickly noticed a pattern: some participants were eager to push themselves, while others hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. One man, sitting on the edge of the mat, caught her attention. He was in his early 30s, with a tense posture and a distant gaze. "You doing okay?" Harper asked, crouching beside him. He glanced at her briefly before looking away. "Yeah, just not used to this." "That's all right," Harper said. "Start small. Do what you can." The man nodded but didn't move. Harper gave him space, focusing on the rest of the group. After the session ended, Lisa approached Harper with a look of admiration. "You were amazing in there," Lisa said. "The group really responded to you." Harper shrugged. "Just doing what I can." "Well, You're doing more than that, Lisa said. A lot of these folks have been through hell. It's not just about fitness for them, it's about finding a way forward. You're helping them do that. Harper nodded, her thoughts lingering on the man who had struggled to engage. The next day, Harper returned to the community center, eager to build on the progress they had made. As she walked through the halls, she noticed the man from the session sitting alone in a corner, staring at his hands. "Hey," Harper said, approaching him. "Mind if I join you?" He looked up, startled, but nodded. Harper sat down, her posture relaxed. "What's your name?" "Noah," he said quietly. "You were in the session yesterday," Harper said. "Yeah," Noah replied, his voice tight. Harper waited, letting the silence stretch. Finally, Noah sighed. "I was in the army. Got out a few years ago. Thought I'd be fine, but—" He trailed off, his hands clenching into fists. "It's not easy," Harper said. "I know." Noah looked at her, his expression a mix of frustration and vulnerability. "Do you? Because it feels like no one does." "I do," Harper said firmly. "I've been where you are, Noah, and I know it doesn't feel like it now, but it gets better." Noah studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Over the next few weeks, Harper made a point of connecting with Noah during each session. She encouraged him to participate, offering quiet words of support when he faltered. Gradually, he began to open up, sharing snippets of his story of failed marriage, nights haunted by memories of combat, the crushing isolation he felt. Harper listened without judgment, sharing pieces of her own journey in return. She told him about the losses she had endured, the guilt that had threatened to consume her, and the people who had helped her find her footing again. "You can't do it alone," Harper said one evening, as they sat on the steps of the community center. "None of us can." Noah nodded, his shoulders relaxing for the first time. "Thanks, Harper, for not giving up on me." One afternoon, Lisa approached Harper with an envelope in her hand. "This is for you," Lisa said, handing it over. Harper opened it to find a letter from the center's director, thanking her for her work and offering her a formal position as a part-time fitness coach. "We'd love to have you here more permanently," Lisa said. Harper stared at the letter, a mix of emotions swirling in her chest. She hadn't planned on staying long-term, but the thought of leaving now felt wrong. "I'll think about it," Harper said finally. That evening, as Harper sat in her apartment, she reflected on how much had changed since she first walked into the center. She thought of Noah, of Tara, of Henry. Each of them had reminded her in their own way that connection and kindness could create ripples far beyond what she could see. She picked up her phone and called Lisa. "I'm in," Harper said. Lisa's joy was evident in her voice. "That's wonderful, Harper. You're going to make such a difference here." As Harper hung up, she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving, she was building something, creating a ripple of kindness that was spreading farther than she had ever imagined. Harper arrived at the community center early the next morning, the soft light of dawn spilling across the parking lot. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of sage and desert blooms. She pushed open the front doors and found the hallways quiet, save for the muffled hum of staff preparing for the day. Her official role as a part-time fitness coach was new, but it felt like a natural extension of her journey. She was no longer an outsider looking in. She was part of something larger, a community where her presence mattered. As Harper entered the fitness room, she spotted Noah sitting on a mat in the corner. His posture was hunched, his head bowed as though weighed down by something invisible. "Morning, Noah," Harper said, setting down her bag. Noah looked up, managing a faint smile. "Morning, Coach." Harper smirked at the nickname. "You're here early." "Couldn't sleep," Noah admitted, his voice low. Harper nodded, pulling a mat beside his. "Want to talk about it?" Noah hesitated, then sighed. "It's the same thing. The dreams, the memories, they don't let up." Harper sat cross-legged, her gaze steady. "I know what that's like." Noah glanced at her, his expression skeptical. "After I left the SEALs, I couldn't sleep for months," Harper said. "Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see my teammate, Kyle. He didn't make it home, and for a long time, I blamed myself." Noah's face softened, the barrier between them cracking just slightly. "How'd you get past it?" "I didn't, not completely," Harper admitted. "But I stopped trying to carry it alone. That's when it started to get better." Noah nodded slowly, his shoulders easing. As the day's fitness session began, Harper noticed Noah participating more actively than usual. He still hesitated on certain moves, but the flicker of determination in his eyes was undeniable. "Nice work," Harper said, after he completed a set of modified push-ups. "Thanks," Noah said, a hint of pride in his voice. The rest of the group responded similarly to Harper's encouragement. Veterans who had once lingered on the edges now stepped forward, eager to engage. Harper marveled at the transformation, realizing that her role was about more than teaching fitness. It was about creating a space where people felt seen and valued. After the session, Lisa approached Harper with a request. "There's a new guy joining us tomorrow," Lisa said. "He's fresh out of the Army and struggling with the transition. I was hoping you could keep an eye on him." "Of course," Harper said. The next day, the new participant arrived, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 20s with a guarded expression. His name was Tyler, and his movements were stiff, as though he were bracing himself against the world. Harper introduced herself and guided Tyler through the session, keeping her tone calm and supportive. He didn't say much, but by the end of the hour, his posture had relaxed slightly. "Good work today," Harper said, as he prepared to leave. "Thanks," Tyler muttered, his voice barely audible. As the weeks went on, Harper continued to mentor both Noah and Tyler, each at their own pace. Noah grew more confident, not only in his physical strength, but also in his ability to open up about his struggles. Tyler remained reserved, but Harper saw glimmers of trust forming in his interactions. One evening, as the group wrapped up their session, Noah approached Harper, a hesitant smile on his face. "Hey, Harper," he began. "A few of us were talking, and we were wondering, would you want to grab a coffee with us sometime? You know, outside of this place?" Harper blinked, caught off guard. She wasn't used to social invitations, especially from those she worked with. "I'll think about it," she said, her tone light. Noah grinned. "Fair enough. Just let us know." That night, Harper sat on her couch, staring at the photograph of her SEAL team. The memories of her time in the military felt less suffocating now, replaced by a sense of gratitude for the connections she had begun to build. She thought about Noah, about Tyler, and about the veterans who had found solace in the community center. They reminded her of herself, people who had faced unimaginable challenges and were now searching for a way forward. For the first time, Harper allowed herself to feel pride, not just in her own resilience, but in the ripple of kindness she had helped create. A week later, Harper accepted Noah's invitation. She joined him and a few others at a local coffee shop, their laughter and camaraderie filling the space. It was a small step, but for Harper, it felt monumental, a reminder that healing wasn't a solitary journey. As she left the coffee shop that evening, the cool desert air brushing against her skin, Harper realized she was no longer carrying her burdens alone. She had found a new team, one built not on survival, but on connection and hope. The coffee shop gathering with Noah and the others lingered in Harper's mind for days. It was a simple evening, no grand gestures, no monumental moments. But it had marked a turning point, a quiet reminder that connections didn't need to be complicated to be meaningful. Back at the community center, Harper noticed the shift not just in herself, but in the veterans she worked with. The group had become more cohesive, supporting one another in ways that mirrored the camaraderie Harper had experienced in the SEALs. Noah, once hesitant and withdrawn, had taken on the role of an encourager, often cheering others on during sessions. Tyler, though still quiet, was beginning to open up, offering small but genuine smiles that hadn't been there before. One afternoon, Lisa approached Harper with an idea. "We've been brainstorming ways to bring more people into the center," Lisa said, handing Harper a flyer. Harper scanned it. The bold title read, "Community Fitness Day, Bridging Strength and Support." "It's a mix of fitness demos, workshops, and storytelling," Lisa explained. "We want to show people what we're about and how much they can gain from being here. I think it could make a real difference." Harper nodded. "Sounds like a good plan. What do you need from me?" Lisa smiled. "We'd love for you to lead a session and maybe share a bit of your story. People look up to you, Harper. You've become a leader here." The word leader caught Harper off guard. She had never sought the spotlight, preferring to stay in the background, guiding others quietly. But as she looked at the flyer and thought about the lives she had touched, Noah, Tyler, Henry, Tara, she realized that sometimes leadership wasn't about stepping forward. It was about standing firm and showing others the way. "All right," Harper said. "I'll do it." The day of the event arrived, and the community center buzzed with energy. Banners hung from the walls, volunteers set up booths, and a steady stream of visitors flowed through the doors. The air was filled with laughter, conversation, and the faint scent of fresh brewed coffee. Harper arrived early to help set up, her usual calm demeanor masking the nerves bubbling beneath the surface. She had agreed to share her story, but the idea of opening up to a crowd felt daunting. "You'll do great," Lisa said, placing a reassuring hand on Harper's shoulder. As the event began, Harper led a fitness session in the main gym. The room was packed with participants, their energy infectious. Harper demonstrated basic movements, guiding the group with her steady voice and encouraging words. By the end, the room was filled with applause, the participants beaming with a sense of accomplishment. Later, Harper stood in the center's auditorium, waiting for her turn to speak. Noah, Tyler, and several others sat in the front row, their presence a quiet show of support. When Lisa introduced her, Harper stepped onto the stage, her boots clicking softly against the polished floor. She took a deep breath, her gaze scanning the crowd. "I'm not used to being up here," Harper began, her voice steady but quiet. "Most of my life, I've worked behind the scenes, supporting others, getting the job done. But over the past few months, I've learned that sometimes sharing your story can be just as powerful as any action you take." She paused, letting her words settle. "I served in the Navy SEALs for over a decade," Harper continued. "It was a life of discipline, camaraderie, and purpose. But when I came home, I lost that sense of connection. I thought I had to figure it out alone, that strength meant not needing anyone." Her gaze softened as she glanced at Noah and the others. "But I was wrong," she said. "Strength isn't about carrying everything on your own. It's about finding people who'll carry it with you. That's what this place has become for me, a team, a family. And I'm grateful to be part of it." The room erupted into applause, and Harper felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was just surviving. She was thriving, surrounded by people who understood her journey. After the event, Harper lingered in the main hall, watching as attendees mingled and laughed. Marcus approached her, a broad grin on his face. "You killed it up there," he said. Harper chuckled. "Thanks. It wasn't as terrifying as I thought it'd be." Marcus nodded toward the crowd. "Look around, Harper. This happened because of you. You've brought people together." Harper followed his gaze, taking in the vibrant scene. Noah was talking animatedly with Tyler, while Tara chatted with a group of volunteers. Even Henry had made an appearance, sitting at a booth and flipping through a book with a delighted smile. "It wasn't just me," Harper said. "It was all of us." That evening, as Harper walked home, the city lights twinkling in the distance, she reflected on how far she had come. The woman who had once kept the world at arm's length had found a place where she belonged. The ripple of kindness had grown into a wave, touching lives in ways she hadn't imagined. And as Harper stepped into her apartment, the quiet no longer felt heavy. It felt peaceful, filled with the echoes of a community she had helped to rebuild. Harper sat on the worn bench in the park, the morning sun warming her face. The park had become a quiet refuge, a place where she could reflect and reconnect. It was here she had first met Henry, whose calm wisdom had reminded her that small gestures often carried the greatest weight. Today, Henry sat beside her, his usual notebook replaced with a thick, dog-eared novel. He adjusted his glasses, squinting slightly at the text. "How's the new fridge working out?" Harper asked. Henry chuckled, setting the book down. "Like a charm. Keeps everything cold, just the way I like it. I've even been able to stock up on a few treats I haven't had in years." Harper smiled, picturing him happily loading ice cream and soda into the shelves. "Glad to hear it." Henry tilted his head, studying her with his usual sharp gaze. "You've been busy lately. I hear the community center's thriving, thanks to you." "It's a team effort," Harper replied. "Ah, but every good team needs a strong leader," Henry said, his voice carrying that familiar mix of warmth and conviction. "You found your place, Harper, and it suits you." Harper considered his words, a quiet satisfaction settling over her. It wasn't just the work she was doing, it was the connections she was building, the sense of purpose she had reclaimed. Later that day, Harper returned to the community center, where the usual buzz of activity filled the air. As she walked through the hallways, she passed Tara, who was demonstrating a self-defense move to a small group. "Keep your stance strong," Tara said, her voice confident. "It's all about leverage, not just strength." Harper paused to watch, pride swelling in her chest. Tara had come so far, transforming from a timid receptionist into a capable and inspiring instructor. "Looking good, Tara," Harper said as the group finished. Tara turned, her face lighting up. "Thanks, Harper. I've been practicing." "It shows," Harper said. Tara hesitated, then said, "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something." "Sure," Harper replied. Tara glanced at the group dispersing behind her before continuing. "I've been thinking about organizing a workshop for women in the community, teaching basic self-defense, confidence building, that kind of thing. Do you think it's a good idea?" "I think it's a great idea," Harper said without hesitation. Tara's face broke into a grin. "Really? I was worried it might be too ambitious." "Ambition isn't a bad thing," Harper said. "If you need help, let me know." Tara nodded, her excitement palpable. "Thank you, Harper. I couldn't have done any of this without you." That evening, Harper found herself back in the fitness room, preparing for the next session. As she set up mats and equipment, Noah entered, his expression lighter than she'd ever seen. "Hey, Harper," Noah said. "Hey, Noah," she replied. "You're early." "Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about something," he said, his tone a mix of nervousness and determination. Harper straightened, giving him her full attention. "I've been thinking about what you said, that I don't have to carry everything alone," Noah began. "And I want to start talking to someone, a counselor, I mean." Harper felt a surge of pride. "That's a big step, Noah. I'm proud of you." "Thanks," Noah said, his voice quieter. "I wouldn't have gotten here without you." Harper shook her head. "You got here on your own. I just reminded you what you were capable of." Noah smiled, his gratitude evident. As the week went on, the ripple of change Harper had set in motion continued to spread. Tyler began mentoring a new group of veterans, offering quiet guidance and encouragement. Tara finalized plans for her workshop, drawing interest from women across the community. And Harper found herself increasingly at the center of it all, not because she sought recognition, but because she had become a source of stability and inspiration. One evening, as Harper walked out of the community center, she noticed Marcus waiting by the steps. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Sure," Harper said, joining him. Marcus held up a small plaque, its polished surface gleaming under the streetlights. The staff pitched in to get this for you. We wanted to say thanks for everything you've done. Harper took the plaque, her throat tightening as she read the inscription, "In gratitude for building strength through kindness." "You didn't have to do this," Harper said, her voice thick with emotion. Marcus grinned. "We wanted to. You've changed this place, Harper, and you've changed us." For a moment, Harper stood in silence, the weight of his words sinking in. She thought of the people she had met, the lives she had touched, and the ways they had touched hers in return. "Thank you," Harper said finally, her voice steady. That night, as Harper sat in her apartment, she placed the plaque on the shelf beside the photograph of her SEAL team. It felt like a bridge between her past and present, a reminder that strength wasn't just about surviving, it was about connecting, growing, and giving back. The ripple of kindness had come full circle, and Harper knew it was just the beginning. The morning sun spilled across the community center's lawn, bathing the vibrant murals and carefully tended flower beds in golden light. Harper stood at the entrance, watching as people filtered inside. It was the grand opening of Tara's self-defense workshop, and the center buzzed with excitement. Tara stood by the registration table, her face a mix of nervousness and pride. Harper walked over, giving her a reassuring nod. "How are you feeling?" Harper asked. "Nervous," Tara admitted, fidgeting with a clipboard. "But in a good way." "You've got this," Harper said. "And if you need anything, I'm here." Tara smiled, her confidence bolstered. "Thanks, Harper. That means a lot." As the workshop began, Harper watched from the sidelines, her heart swelling with pride, as Tara led the group through a series of drills. The women participating ranged from teenagers to seniors, each one eager to learn and grow. Tara's voice carried across the room, steady and sure. "You don't have to be the strongest person in the room to protect yourself. It's about using what you have, your awareness, your instincts, your courage." Harper caught Lisa's eye from across the room, and the two shared a knowing smile. The workshop was more than a success. It was a testament to the power of resilience and community. Later that day, Harper found herself back in the fitness room, tidying up after the regular session. As she stacked mats and wiped down equipment, Noah appeared in the doorway. "Hey, Harper," he said, his tone lighter than usual. "Hey, Noah," Harper replied. "What's up?" "I wanted to say thanks," Noah said, stepping into the room. "For everything. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." "You don't have to thank me," Harper said, leaning against the wall. "You did the hard part." Noah smiled, but there was a seriousness in his eyes. "You've changed my life, Harper, and I'm not the only one. This place wouldn't be the same without you." Harper felt a lump rise in her throat, but managed a small smile. "I'm just glad to see you thriving, Noah. That's what this is all about." As the day wound down, Harper returned home to her quiet apartment. The plaque from the staff sat on the shelf beside her SEAL team photograph, a symbol of how far she had come. She poured herself a cup of tea and sat on the couch, her dog curled up at her feet. The events of the past months played in her mind, the confrontation at the gym, meeting Henry, mentoring Tara and Noah, and finding a renewed sense of purpose at the community center. For so long, Harper had lived in the shadow of her past, burdened by loss and guilt. But now, those shadows had been replaced by something brighter, a network of people who had not only supported her, but had also inspired her to grow. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Marcus. "Marcus, great news, Noah's volunteering to lead next week's fitness session. Told you he'd surprise us." Harper smiled, her heart swelling with pride. The following week, Harper returned to the community center, greeted by warm smiles and friendly nods. She joined Noah's session, watching as he guided the group with a mix of humor and quiet encouragement. "You're doing great," Harper said to him afterward. "Learned from the best," Noah replied, grinning. That evening, as Harper left the center, she paused at the top of the steps, looking out at the city skyline. The journey she had begun months ago had led her to a place she hadn't expected: a community, a sense of belonging, and a deeper understanding of what it meant to be strong. Strength wasn't about facing the world alone. It was about building connections, giving back, and allowing yourself to be vulnerable. It was about the ripples of kindness that spread farther than you could ever imagine. Harper walked to her car, the cool evening air brushing against her skin. As she drove home, a quiet sense of fulfillment settled over her. The challenges she had faced had shaped her, but they no longer defined her. And as she turned onto her street, Harper knew this was just the beginning. The ripples of kindness she had set in motion would continue to grow, touching lives in ways she might never see. Because sometimes the smallest acts of kindness carried the greatest power to transform. Harper's journey is a powerful reminder of how resilience, kindness, and the connections we build can transform not only our lives, but the lives of those around us. From her quiet acts of courage to the community she helped foster, Harper showed us that strength isn't about facing the world alone. It's about standing together and lifting each other up. If this story moved you, share it with someone who might need a reminder of the impact of compassion and perseverance. Let's keep spreading those ripples of kindness. For more stories like this, stories that inspire, challenge, and leave you reflecting long after they end, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Together, we can create a community of hope, strength, and positivity. Thank you for being part of this journey. See you in the next story.